for each one of us to understand. You have to understand something before you can accept it. So to develop the understanding of each culture, to respect it, to embrace each other, that is what lifts a community up. That's what makes our country and our democracy stronger. So December 7th, come together. It will be well worth it.
This is an opportunity for us to grow our souls and have a journey together as human beings to make a difference in one another's lives.
Dialogue is the beginning of mutual understanding. May we all listen to understand. Let's be proactive instead of reactive. Focus on the common ground to build trust, to forgive, and to accept and embrace.
On December the 7th for the Civic Leadership Forum. We are better together. We are breaking down walls. This is our opportunity for different cultures to come together.
It's not only Asian Americans. It's not only African Americans. It's United Americans. This dialogue is very important to understand the culture and appreciate the difference. Join us on December the 7th, Civic Leadership Forum, Different Culture, Common Ground, a dialogue between communities.
Learn from the life and legacy of Grace Lee Boggs and understand her call for us to change ourselves to change the world.
Our different past is an opportunity to combine our richness and diversity. Let's join together and create a new 2022 and a new future together. Come join us on December 7th.
Ethnic groups of different cultures must talk. In order to understand, we need a dialogue. Let's move forward with a dialogue.
We have to face it. We do have a problem, and we do need to engage each other. And we do need to engage each other to find the solutions. Either we all think together or we will rise up together. And I definitely prefer to rise up together.
Many people saying that they understand racism, but I would say unless you're the receiving end, most people may not truly understand what racism is all about. However, we must have the courage to talk about the race issue. So let's start talking it now.
For the great journey of 1,000 miles, all of us have to make the first step. Let's work together.
Dialogue is important because the America I aspire for our next generations to live in is full of acceptance of cultural differences and built on mutual trust amongst members of different communities.
Let's learn from each other and work together to help our communities. Please join us on December 7th.
Hi, I'm San Francisco Mayor London Breed here on Ding Ding TV. Wanted to say hi to all the innovative engineers that are out there creating the new technologies and making our world a better place.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Civic Leadership Forum, Different Culture, Common Ground, a cultural dialogue between communities. At this time, we're on Clubhouse and also on Zoom. So first of all, I would like to invite our co-moderator, the co-producer of Asian Americans Network from Clubhouse, Han Yuefang, to give us the opening at Clubhouse and Zoom. Han, microphone is yours. We cannot hear you, Han. Are you muted yourself? Okay, Han, we still cannot hear you. So you just try to figure out, and I would like to give the microphone to Han. Yes, we cannot hear you, Han. Sorry for that. So I'm going to give the microphone to our co-organizer, Civic Leadership USA Executive Director, Anthony Ying, to give us a short welcome speech. Anthony, the stage is yours. Go, yeah, please. Yes, Anthony, you're there, you're ready?
Yes. Hi, good evening. My name is Anthony Ng, Executive Director of Civic Leadership USA. We are proud sponsor of this series of Civic Leadership Forum organized by Ding Ding TV with such impressive and diverse speakers and panelists. So welcome. Tonight we're embarking on a difficult but meaningful dialogue to build trust, forgiveness, and healing. Let's listen to each other to understand. Let's be proactive instead of reactive. As dialogue is the beginning of understanding before we define the solutions. We are not each other's problem as the media usually put us against each other. Last 2 years of hate crimes are only the symptom of a broken system in our society. I'm grateful to welcome you all to set sail on this uncharted territory. I want to quote my spiritual mentor as my closing for tonight, this beginning. Honesty without kindness is brutality, but kindness without honesty is only manipulation. May we all speak from the heart with honesty and kindness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Hello, everyone. My name is Diana Ding, the founder and CEO of Silicon Valley Community Media, Ding Ding TV. Thank you for being with us today. This March, together with 3 community partners, we organized Stop Asian Hate Crime, What We Can Do Together event on Clubhouse with 900 attendees. During that event, an African-American entrepreneur, William, said, "I'm so sorry to see many Asian hate crimes associated with Black kids. They do not represent our community. Let's talk." Last month, 4 teenagers attacked Asian students on the train in Philadelphia. My friend Diana Sun called me and sent me a message and asked what we can do. We feel it's very important and necessary to have this honest and sincere dialogue today between AAPI and African American communities without any hidden agendas. We aim to stand on the common ground and lift our voice above the noise and call our community to appreciate and respect our difference, learn and grow together. Our Asian elders do not need to live in fear of our African neighbors. Our African neighbors will not feel unwelcomed or unaccepted by our Asian brothers and sisters. Let's talk about what has brought us to this point and what lesson we can learn from this and what steps we can take together. Asian as well as all people of color have a common goal, making American, our home, a better safe place for multicultural community to live together. Today's event will be within 2.5 hours. We have Mr. Sandy Chow, Mr. Stephen Ward, Honorable California State Assembly Member Alex Lee as keynote speakers. Following those stories, we will then hold a panel discussion on different cultural common ground, led by Gloria Yang. After that, Mr. Ken Fang will give us a summary. We will open Q&A led by Han at about 6:50 for 20 minutes. We are live streaming this event on YouTube too. You can search Dingding TV on YouTube to watch online or share this link after the event. Dingding TV, a Silicon Valley community media, has been the voice of Silicon Valley Asian Americans and event creators for over 12 years. We have created millions of events and organized hundreds of millions of contents and organized hundreds of events. I'm so thankful for the support from our community and our audience. Thanks to the great job from our organizing team, Sandy Wang, Hong Yue Fang, Gloria Yang. Thanks to all the speakers and participants. I also want to thank all the partners, our organizer, Dingding TV, Silicon Valley Community Media, Civic Leadership USA. Our community partners are James and Grace Lee Box Center, United Chinese American, American Society of Engineering of Indian Origin, Oakland Chinatown Chamber of Commerce, APAPA, Young and Lamay Association, Asian Americans United, AAUC, Asian Americans Network, CareU, Anderson and Associates, Silicon Valley Insider, Hindu American Foundation. It's truly my great honor to work together with all of you. With that, I want to check if Han is available. Han, can you turn on your camera right now? If you're available, and please go ahead.
Yes. Can you see me and can you hear me on Zoom?
Wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Diana. Thank you for the opening. Yes, I'm honored and happy to report that Asian Americans Network, supported by Dingding TV Innovation Channel, was created this year in April. We started in April this year and meet every Tuesday on a weekly basis. So we, at this point, we have about over 30 sessions now, and we have 1,000 members. So Asian Americans Network is meant to be a safe and supportive public forum for diverse Asian Americans and their friends and allies to come together and support each other every week. We share stories of joy and celebrations, as well as struggles and challenges. So our Asian Americans Network facilitates inclusive, open participation, and we strive to deliver quality information meant to inspire and help. And with that, I'm honored to be participating tonight in this forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Han.
Back to you.
Han is a Vietnamese American community leader and co-producer of Asian Americans Network. He's also an Amazon best-selling author, a veteran that has been working in Silicon Valley high tech in project management and market development. Thank you, Han. So next, we're going to invite our first speaker, Mr. Sandy Chow. He's the chairman of Civic Leadership USA and the Silicon Valley Community Media. He's one of the pioneers, Asian American tech entrepreneurs in the United States, co-founder of many successful companies. And as an investor, he provided venture capital to startups and being their mentors. He served as executive roles in many organizations. He's truly an inspiration to many of us. He's been living in China, Vietnam, Hong Kong, United States, and doing business globally. So he has a deep understanding about the diverse culture and different communities. He's also the reason that I involved in civic engagement. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Sandy Chow.
Well, I'm so happy to see you guys here online. And then I hope my microphone works and then everybody can hear me clearly. I'm so happy and honored to be together with all of you. And then really, it's truly a really good, great get together. I mean, we're very proud to sponsor Ding TV, among many others. And Ding TV have every year 4 leadership forums. And this one is very special. It's because before we concentrated on Asian Americans and then how to get into the mainstream and how to enhance our contribution to the mainstream of America. This time I'm so excited because we expanded our forum, especially with the Black community. And even though we have a long history of collaboration. Yes, Diana has said that I'm actually quite multi-ethnic background and multicultural exposure. And I was counted when I reached 28 years old. On the average, I actually resided in 7 different places, some twice. Basically, I was in China, Shanghai, China, and then in Hong Kong, and then in Vietnam, and then back to Hong Kong, and come to USA, and then back to Vietnam, and then come to the United States again. And then that means every 4 years I have to change a complete different environment, and then thing progresses. Because my experience is that I have encountered the colonial rule, and then also the war ruling, and then the US, and then every place I went is a cultural adjustment to me. And then I really have experienced quite a bit when I was, then after that one, by the mid-1980s, I went to live in Taiwan for a while, and then I lived in Beijing for a while, and then back to Hong Kong and coming back. But all through these years, then I think the greatest place I could live is United States of America. I think this is something that I can call home. And this is what I can call my allegiance with honor to be in this country. And this is the only country I would choose for my future generation. And this is the best breeding ground for fair democracy, equal opportunity, and we have room to progressive improvement. As Haipei just mentioned about, this is a place we can rise together. We can have a choice to rise together. I would say, with our brother and sister in multicultural society in this country, we can embrace each other to work on the progressive improvement, what I said. The future is ever-changing and challenging, yet together we can change, and then we can conquer all difficulties and achieve greatness together. So I like to quote my beloved idol, Martin Luther King. And he said in the speech of at a mountaintop, he said he's as I am, and he said he's an old man, but longevity have its place. He said, we are together now at the mountaintop. Together we can work hand in hand to reach the promised land. This will be a continuous effort, maybe beyond my limited mortal life. However, I have the confidence that we all will reach the promised land of greatness of our country, and together with our brother and sister of all culture, the United States of America is the best united combination of greatness that all the world can offer. So we should cherish it. We will succeed because we have common ground. That means that we all have a common good. That common good will be our teaching later when Stephen is talking about the great Grace Lee Boggs. I have to say quite a bit of stuff because always we're challenged with a lot of misunderstanding. And then the misunderstanding, when we can summarize into stereotyping. Let's talk about stereotyping. I had been a victim of stereotyping. To overcome stereotyping, we need mutual acceptance. We need to educate each other. We need assertiveness in facing the change. We should be mentoring each other, and then role model by example, and then we should have friendly persuasion so that we can improve our relationship. When I started a high-tech company in the 1970s, I went to the bank to ask for an equipment lease to produce microchips. However, at that time, the stereotype is the Chinese Americans was assumed to be only in other business like restaurant business, grocery business, laundry business, or plant nursery business, or even at that time, we're doing landscape for houses to houses. In order to do that, I have to change that perception. We have to work hard, with ingenuity. We need to be persistent to overcome the fear unknown that I think with only hard work and then helping each other and then networking among each other, we can overcome this kind of stereotyping. 20 years ago, I started an online software company for municipal government on their workflow. Because of the affirmative actions law passed in the 1980s, a lot of contracts from the municipal government have to award it to different entities. And that time we have great working relationship with a lot of Black enterprises in computer consulting, in training, and this gives us great working experience. This kind of collaboration is not reported very often, but somehow we just need to cherish the pressure experience, because a lot of very technically and engineering astute Black enterprises, they were basically because of not enough exposure. And then a lot of times we fall into the same stereotyping. So therefore, in order, we have to go on this, overcome the stereotype, that we can actually work together very nicely. Another thing is, I would say we have to build on the positive portion of our collaboration. Under Diana Ding TV and the nonprofit organization Silicon Valley Community Media had always emphasized the positive side of all events, especially on different cultures. Unlike a lot of commercial media that they really want to report on sensationalized events to stir up the misdirected emotions in order to be commercially successful. And that is actually some kind of obstacle we have to overcome. We just need to work together to make some changes. We should embrace each other with our positive rather than stereotyping the negative. I am a relatively devoted Christian. I spend a lot of time and resources to propagate the teaching of the Bible, especially to the youth. However, I'm always on the side of the misunderstood and the underprivileged. By far, right now, for one example, the majority of Muslims are peace-loving. They're generous, they're friendly. Their high moral standard and caring. They're very caring in nature because of the teaching of the Quran. In the United States, where a lot of Black Muslim brothers and sisters and Muslim all over the world are here in the United States. We should embrace each other rather than rejecting without further understanding and reaching out for each other. That's exactly among all people with different culture, we should reach out and try to understand and compassion and look into the positive side rather than the negative side. After the Boston Marathon bombing by 2 Kyrgyzstan, they're Muslims. I think we should embrace the cultural difference rather than create rejection. So therefore, immediately I supported a multi-country ministry team in Kyrgyzstan to help train youth to accept modern business and to be more accepted international, and then we teach international communication skill. And for that, I also bought a school site for that purpose, and that collaboration and friendship created among the Muslim country. I think it's a good step to start. We make a stride, turning this misunderstanding into trust and love for each other. I think among us, we should embrace. That is why I believe we should do the right thing. We should work on the positive side rather than the negative side. When I was first working with Wajid Saeed of the Muslim Education Fund, I know working with them consistently will create mutual trust and admiration. That persistence, that continue embracing each other, actually will use so much goodwill and then give the peace-loving and caring people in the Muslim community can be exposed to all of us. Among a lot of Asians Americans, among a lot of Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, there's so much goodness in them that is not really propagated. I think together with all our goodness, we can build a great United States of America. So therefore, I think because of that, my good brother Wajid, we just call each other brother, even though we grow up in different places. I grew up mostly in the Far East Asia, America, and Wajid grew up in Yemen. I think, but somehow, geography should not be a barrier when we are in the United States of America, because this is a place that we can be united. So this is what I treasure so much. I would say today is a great opportunity of this great panel. We should continue a bonding, the continual bonding that we are merged together. Then we have to merge together to see and then face the challenge of today, and we can prepare for the future. Due to injustice and lack of fairness in resource distribution, it's a hard thing. We have to continue, but there are still a lot of bad consequences because of injustice and lack of fairness. By no means this is easy. I was in a Kennedy Center one time, and President Kennedy said, "We do it not because it's easy, because we do it because it's hard." When we overcome hard things can prosper and everlasting. This is a great time that I'm so happy that we are doing the bonding together. Together we can lock down walls, and we will stride and triumph over the stubborn high wall against us. Well, at the end, I will quote the same thing. As Martin Luther King had prophesied, the promised land would be at hand. So bless our country, bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Stanley Chow. Yes, this is a great opportunity for us to embrace each other and understand each other, appreciate the difference. Next, I would like to invite Stephen Ward. Stephen Ward is an associate professor of Afro-American and African students at the University of Michigan. Stephen Ward's highly anticipated biography of James and Grace Lee Boggs live up to its promise, and then some. Set largely in Detroit, the center of Black working class insurgency, with absolutely clarity and care, Ward traces the couple's evolution towards revolution. Today, he's going to tell the compelling story of what happened when two Americans' most original thinkers dedicated their life to acting in the world. Stephen, the stage is yours. Go ahead. Thank you.
Diana, thank you very much. And hello to everyone. I'm going to share my screen in a moment to just show a few images to go along with what I'd like to say today about Grace Lee Boggs and James Boggs. So please give me a confirmation that you can in fact see.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Thank you. So these two figures, Grace Lee Boggs and James Boggs, shared a 40-year partnership. This partnership was at once marital. They were a married couple, and it was political and it was intellectual. They were activists in a range of social movements, and they were thinkers. They were theoreticians. They wrote a range of pieces from pamphlets to books and shorter pieces across their time together, before they were together, and then certainly when they were together. And their partnership lasted from 1953, when they first met as part of the same organization, and they were married the next year, to James's death in 1993. And Grace lived until 2015. So she in fact lived to be 100 years old, 100 years, 100 days to be precise. Here's an image of them. Grace, as many know, was an Asian American woman, Chinese American. James Boggs, some called him Jimmy, was an African American. So just in their partnership, they embody or a shining example for us for the type of Asian American and African American solidarity that we sort of need in this moment. So I think they're important for us in that way. But also, equally, if not more important, I think they offer us a model of people who saw the need to transform ourselves and to transform this country. And they took that upon the responsibility to do that. They call themselves, and throughout their adult lives and their activist lives, they identify themselves as revolutionaries. What precisely that meant, it evolved for them, but it grew to be where they saw the need, to take responsibility as, and here's another image of them, take responsibility as part of the society to transform the society. So in fact, they were constantly building towards the next American Revolution. And in fact, that's the name of Grace, the title of Grace's last book, The Next American Revolution, Sustainable Activism for the 21st Century. I'd like to read you a passage from that book to give you a sense of what she said about the next American Revolution. So this is Grace Lee Boggs in her book, The Next American Revolution, published in 2011. The next American Revolution, at this stage in our history, is not principally about jobs or health insurance or making it possible for more people to realize the American dream of upward mobility. It is about acknowledging that we as Americans have enjoyed middle-class comforts at the expense of other peoples all over the world. It is about living the kind of lives that will not only slow down global warming, but also end the galloping inequality both inside this country and between the global North and the global South. It is about creating a new American dream whose goal is a higher humanity instead of a higher standard of living dependent on empire. It is about practicing a new, more active, global, and participatory concept of citizenship. It is about becoming the change we wish to see in the world. The courage, the commitment, the strategies required for this kind of revolution are very different from those required to storm the Winter Palace or the White House. Instead of viewing the people of the US as masses to be mobilized in increasingly aggressive struggles for higher wages, better jobs, or guaranteed health care, we must have the courage to challenge ourselves to engage in activities that build a new and better world by improving the physical, psychological, political, and spiritual health of ourselves, our families, our communities, our cities, our world, our planet. So I'd like to spend just a few minutes now giving a sense of her trajectory along with James Boggs and how she and they came to that perspective of what the next American Revolution should look like. And I'll point out, as Diana said, Detroit, the city of Detroit was the location where they lived together and they struggled, and it was also influenced their thinking, their evolving thinking about how to make change. Neither of them, however, was from Detroit. They each moved there, again, met there and built their lives and continued their struggles there. Grace, and this is a picture of her as a child, was born in 1915 in Providence, Rhode Island, to Chinese immigrant parents. Her parents, Yin Lan and Chen Dongdu, were from the Taishan County in Guangdong province, particularly the village of Zhejiang in China. Born in the 19th century, late 19th century. They both migrated to the US. Grace was born again in Providence, Rhode Island in 1915. Went to school there and in New York, in Queens, New York. This is a photo of Grace and her father and her siblings. Forgive me, I don't have a photo here of her mother. Her father was a very successful restaurant owner. These are some images of one of his restaurants, Chen Li's. These are postcards and advertisements for his restaurant. So this was a big part of context of Grace's growing up, though she didn't live in a Chinese American community, but she grew up as a Chinese American, but often in white communities and white spaces, including her education. She earned an undergraduate degree from Barnard College, now part of Columbia, in 1935. 5 years later, in 1940, she earned a PhD in philosophy from Bryn Mawr. Upon earning that degree, she launched herself into a life of activism. She did not pursue a professional career, which those set of degrees would seem to suggest. In the middle of earning these degrees in this latter part of the Depression, and then during World War II, she was motivated by the struggles among African Americans in particular, the Double V campaign and the March on Washington movement during World War II, to transform the place of Black people in the society. And that led to her studying Marxism, a radical ideology to understand and to combat the global inequalities. And that led her on a path of activism that she would lead the rest of her life. And it was there that she met James Boggs, a picture of him here, who was born in 1919 in Marion Junction, Alabama, segregated South, and experienced all the expressions of racism of the early and mid 20th century American South. Upon graduating from high school in 1937, he left Alabama, settled in Detroit, and by 1940 became a auto worker and a labor activist. And it was in that context where he met Grace. They were part of the same organization. She moved to Detroit in 1953, and they were married the next year. And they commenced this 4 decades where they were together in love and in struggle. Here's a photo of them, one of the few photos of them in a somewhat glamorous pose. But their life was very much about organizing, first in labor struggles, civil rights struggles in the Black community of Detroit, and then in solidarity with communities across the city and across the country. They were in a range of organizations, and they wrote many things all of it's driving towards them trying to understand what would it take to transform this country beyond what it was and towards the possibilities of what it could be. So these are a few images, more of them. This is Grace and Jimmy, as again, as some people call them, with Grace's father, and another member of the family. I think that's one of Grace's siblings' spouses. At a early 1960s Thanksgiving, he lived with them at the last part of his life in Detroit. So now I'm just going to close by showing you a few more images of them. This is an organization, one of the many organizations they were part of, called the National Organization for an American Revolution, in which they spent a lot of time trying to build local chapters across the country of people who were committed to transforming the country. At the end of Jimmy's life, they created an organization called Detroit Summer, which was in 1992 in the context of the Los Angeles Rebellion, the so-called Rodney King Rebellion. Though that's what it's called, we should also recognize that a part of the context of the uprising in Los Angeles in 1992 was not only the acquittal of the police officers who beat Rodney King, but also the killing of 15-year-old Latasha Harlins, African-American girl who was killed by Korean shop owner Soon Ja-doo and was not given jail time. And I mentioned that in part as an aside, but it's an important aside because it reflects some of the historical tensions between African-American and Asian American communities, which we have the responsibility to attend to. But so in 1992, they created Detroit Summer, which is one of many organizations, which I'm just saying a little bit now, encourage you to learn more about it, but part of the lineage that they have bequeathed to us, or the people have continued to engage in ways to be responsible to our communities, and again, to try to transform the communities and the broader society. A few more images of them, a couple of images of some of the pamphlets and books they wrote. This is their 1974 book, Revolution and Evolution in the 20th Century. This is a cover of Grace's last book, from which I read the passage. This was a sheet that we put that the Boggs Center released upon Grace's passing. So the James and Grace Lee Boggs Center to Nurture Community Leadership is a current organization which Kim Shirobi, who will be speaking in the panel, and I are both part of, which was created in 1995 in the aftermath of Jimmy's death, and served as the political base for Grace for her remaining 20 years. And it still exists. And so I invite you to learn more about the work of the Boggs Center, to see how we in Detroit are trying to connect with others to carry forth what Jimmy and Grace created, and to conceptualize for ourselves now what needs to be done to transform the country. And I'll close there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephen. Yes, we do recording this event, so we can watch this again, and you can share the link from the YouTube to your friends. This is an amazing story about this wonderful couple. If you search Grace Lee Boggs, you will see so many quotes she said. She used to say, history is not the past. It is the story we tell about the past. That's why here we're telling this story and give us a new meaning of why we're here today. So next, I would like to invite our next wonderful speaker, Honorable California State Assembly Member. Okay. State Assembly Member Alex Lee. Alex Tianming Lee was born in San Jose, California, and to immigrant parents from Hong Kong. Mr. Lee was elected as California State Assembly Member on December 2020, representing his home, the South Bay, also my home. And he became the youngest member and the firstborn in 1990s, as well as the youngest Asian American State Assembly member. He constantly organized online events for community and directly, sharing the important issues and provide the opportunity for citizens to ask questions. He has made his time for this event and answer your questions at the end. So now please join me to welcome our next speaker, California State Assembly member, Mr. Alex Lee. Stage is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Diana. Thank you for having me on this panel. Just wanted to briefly talk today about all the great dialogue we're having and making sure that we truly have a pluralistic and multicultural dialogue about hatred and misunderstandings we have. As mentioned, I'm Assemblymember Alex Lee. I represent the 25th Assembly District in the East and South Bay area. I represent one of the only Asian majority districts in the entire state legislature, and I'm proud to be the youngest Asian American elected in the state legislature. So many of us are asking ourselves through this tumultuous year, of course, with the pandemic and rising hate incidents, is how do we get even to this critical point? Well, violence against Asian Americans is on the rise. This is indisputable. And the fear that people are feeling is very real, but it is not new. According to Stop AAPI Hate, an organization that has been tracking reports on anti-Asian violence, there's been a 150% increase from the period of March 2020 to June 2021, basically most of the pandemic. There were 9,081 incidences reported to the organization, including 4,548 hate incidents in 2020 alone. And the other half are in 4,533 in 2021. Official law enforcement statistics show that the largest jurisdictions reports of anti-Asian hate crimes more than doubled between 2019 and 2021. And COVID-19 has, of course, fueled anti-Asian sentiment, xenophobia, and violence, especially when there's a rampant misinformation being perpetuated, and especially in the early days of the pandemic. News reports and social media have perpetuated the idea that anti-Asian violence is committed mostly by people of color, and particularly by Black people. Videos that have gone viral are more likely to be from urban areas where there is more surveillance, but analysis now shows that majority of attackers are actually white men, despite the sensationalized posts and videos that get shared. Even official law enforcement statistics compiled by Dr. Yan Zheng and colleagues in a study published in 2021 show that 75% of offenders in anti-Asian hate crimes are white. In fact, Christian nationalism is actually the strongest predictor of xenophobic views of COVID-19, and virulent nationalism can sow hate, division, and discrimination. And all are, of course, susceptible to this. So how do we get to this narrative that there's a driving wedge of division between people of color? Well, anti-Asian sentiment in the United States is, of course, not new. It's existed since the very first days our ancestors set foot in this continent. Though lynching in America is often associated with violence against Black folks, the largest mass lynching in America was indeed the Chinese Massacre in 1871, right here in California, in Los Angeles, when 18 Chinese immigrants were hung. Look to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which banned Chinese immigrants from coming to the United States and then becoming citizens. And President Franklin Roosevelt's executive order in 1942 that put Japanese Americans into internment camps following Pearl Harbor, which happened exactly 80 years ago today. But more recently, Asian Americans have been stereotyped as the model minority. Newspapers as recent as the 1950s often glorified Asian Americans as industrious, law-abiding citizens who kept their heads down and never complained. Of course, the model minority myth is in contrast to how other people of color should be behaving. And by using this harmful narrative, people have used it to subjugate Black people as lazy and unwilling to work, increasing tensions between our communities, just feeding stereotypes into each other. It also harms Asian Americans because, of course, our vast diaspora, we aren't a monolith, and our experience aren't the same. It dismisses legitimate disparities between our communities. So how do we end this madness that we're in? Well, in the state legislature this year, I was proud to advocate for and help secure a historic $156.5 million to provide resources to addressing rising hate incidences from the state. And the vast majority of that money, $110 million, goes directly to community-based organizations. And the goal of the money is not to penalize or further divide or widen gaps between people of color, but to really get money out there to provide better understanding. So this goes into towards tracking hate incidences, resources to community-based organizations and ethnic media, and making sure there's more of this dialogue and more resources to the communities, to organizations that are working directly within our communities. So I was very proud that we were able to work collaboratively in the state legislature, a very diverse body, to make sure we were thinking about a new way to build cohesion, unity ahead, and not just repeating reactionary measures. So, if we look also back on our history, there's also a strong history of solidarity, as alluded to previous speakers before. Black and Asian solidarity has long had a history in America. It was actually Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist, who fought against the Chinese Exclusion Act. And in a speech he gave in the 19th century, he argued, "We are a composite nation, a people made up from many peoples, that the outspread wings of the American eagle are broad enough to shelter all who are likely to come." And during the Philippine-American War, Black leaders and soldiers opposed U.S. colonization of the Philippines. And during the Civil Rights Movement, that influenced U.S. immigration policy and led to the elimination of the racially motivated quota system, to pave the way for more Asian Americans to immigrate to America. And personally, if that did not happen, I would not be born here in California. And when Vincent Chen was murdered in June 1982, almost 40 years ago, it was Black activists like Jesse Jackson that stood in solidarity and demanded answers and justice. We also now need to stand in solidarity when injustices occur, like the recent murders, and very high-profile recent murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. Black Americans have also experienced high levels of racial discrimination since the pandemic began, and continue to experience the highest levels of hate crimes. Though we may be pitted against one another, it's activism and allyship that will help us overcome hate and division. Through a better understanding of each other, learning one another's histories, as well as our own histories, we can help develop a mutual respect understanding, and that's how we'll move forward together. And I'm proud to be part of that generation and part of this dialogue to be moving us forward together. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Honorable Assembly Member Alex Lee. And especially thank you for the support for ethnic medias. This is so important for us to tell our story in our own way and have our voice be heard. Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to introduce the moderator for our panel discussion, my dear friend, Gloria Young. Gloria is the president of Young and LeMay Associates. He has over 25 years of experience working for public sectors and as a management consultant in both the public and private sectors. Young was appointed by Governor Newsom to the California Workforce Development Agency in 2019. Young is a member of Board of Directors of the Institute of Cultural Engagement, New One Scheme, and a past member of Advisory Council. Young served as a clerk to the board and legislative administrator for the city and the county of San Francisco for 9 years. She was the first woman and the first person of color in that highly influential position, leading the entire legislative branch. Young also worked for City of Palo Alto for 25 years. Young held elective office on the Santa Clara Board of Education for 13 years. Young is also the author of Knowledge Management Tales, The Tale of Two Cities, from San Francisco to Johannesburg. She's also the one who taught me the important word, Ubuntu. That means I am because you are, or you are because I am. That is so important for us to get to know each other. She's truly an inspiration to me. And right now I'm going to give the microphone to Gloria Young and to lead this panel. Gloria, microphone is yours. Go ahead.
First of all, thank you, Diana, for putting together this incredible event. I'd like to thank the Honorable Assemblyman Lee and Stephen and Sandy for their previous remarks. I thought it's been a profound discussion to this point. And I thank you that we have a fabulous panel that will discuss our differences in terms of culture and then also our common ground. This is an opportunity for us to have a dialogue between our two communities. This is our journey of opportunity to share, discern, gain wisdom and knowledge about our cultures, the Asian Americans and the African Americans. This is breaking down the walls that separate us and attacking ignorance, denial, silence, and anger. We have allotted an hour for this panel discussion. And so I will ask each panelist to introduce themselves.
I can't hear.
And you can't hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we hear you perfectly.
Okay. All right. Let me go back to the video. We have allotted 1 hour for this conversation, and I will ask each panelist to introduce themselves and to answer the question that I will pose. So I will call on each of you to introduce yourselves, and you will have 3 minutes for your introduction, as well as a response to this following question. Given our history of survival in the United States for Asian Americans and African Americans, how did we get here? To a place where there is fear, stereotyping, separation, distrust, disrespect, tension, and yes, violence. Hai-Pei, will you please get us started in this conversation?
Hai-Pei, we see you. Go ahead.
Hai-Pei, are you ready to start the conversation? Hai-Pei, can you hear me? Are you ready to start the conversation?
I think Happy just mentioned that he cannot hear anything, so he just dropped off. I think he is going to sign again. Yeah.
Okay, maybe, that's fine.
Yeah.
Gloria, we can see you, we can hear you, so go ahead. Don't.
I will start with Gerald. Gerald, can you start the conversation, and we'll come back to you, Hai-Pei.
Thank you, Gloria.
Introduce yourself.
First of all, I appreciate the invitation to participate in this groundbreaking effort, and a little bit about myself. I spent several decades working in city government, both in the city of Oakland as well as the city of San Francisco. I've also served in other cities in Alameda and Contra Costa County. Primarily, most of my time was spent around the issues of land use, having served in the planning departments in all of these cities. In doing so, in helping to form policy regarding land use controls, I have dealt with a variety of ethnic communities, both in the city of San Francisco and the city of Oakland. And so, working in the community is something that I value a great deal. And it's something that I think is also important that I continue to participate in these discussions, because it helps me to communicate to my small network in my community, because I think that's what all of us have to do. Now, how did we get to this? I think that clearly Assemblyman Lee spoke to a great deal of the issues. And given that we do have an hour, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot that's going to be contributed here, I won't repeat what he said, because I agree with most of it. And there is no one place that you can put all of the blame, but I think that a great deal of the blame could be placed in several areas. And one of those is obviously the media has misrepresented this, has highlighted the nature of this in an inaccurate way. And of course, while most of the media that has presented this has presented the issues related to violent crimes, and who is committing the crimes and what kind of crimes are being committed, I think are also being framed incorrectly as well. And again, while Assemblyman Lee spoke to the issue of Black Americans and the conflict with the Asian community, I think at the same time, we should not overlook that while violent crimes get the majority of the attention, the vast majority of the crimes that are being committed against Asian Americans are nonviolent, both in terms of verbal assault, shunning, harassment, things of that nature are just as prevalent, and we need to keep those in mind as well. Not only is the print media and TV misrepresenting this, but I really do believe that we should put a great deal of attention on social media, specifically social media from the perspective of people who follow Facebook, Twitter, and especially the apps that are of an international nature, because that's where the videos of the violent crimes have its most damning effects, because people tend to believe more what they see, regardless of what the social science is telling them. What they see is sensational. What they see really does generate a lot of attention. And what people are seeing is very, very disturbing. But I think that it obviously is not telling the entire story. But it is, again, more effective in this incorrect narrative, because, again, people believe what they see. And videos generally tend to confirm pre-existing prejudices and stereotypes that people have. And also, these videos tend to go viral, not just in the United States. They're spread throughout the world. And that generates even more tension, I think, because, again, it tends to give credibility to this narrative, which is not correct. I think we also need to make sure that we don't forget that we've had bad leadership as well, and that's contributed to this. Everybody knows what we've been faced with over the last 4 years, how leaders have essentially used this pandemic for political reasons, how it has ultimately turned into this weapon that has been aimed at Asian Americans incorrectly, and obviously in a very bad way. I also think that we're here in this position because it doesn't appear as though there are consequences for bad behavior. People seem to believe that they'll be able to get away with these violent and non-violent acts. And it generates people believing that if there's no consequences, I'm going to continue to do this freely. Needless to say, we all see it, and we all know the truths here.
Hello.
Again, the statistics are there.
Judy. Thank you, Honan, for joining us tonight.
The fact of the matter is,
we are running a special program,
it's important
a Civic Leadership Forum.
What the current problems are and how we got here. I'm much more interested in talking about how we're going to get to a new place. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Gloria to allow others to contribute to this as well.
Gerald, we'll get to that question of where do we go from here. So thank you for your sharing. I appreciate that. Hai-Pei, are you available to speak? Let's see. Okay, Carl, could you share? Introduce yourself and share. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm happy to follow my brother, Gerald here. My name is Carl Chen. I'm the president of the Oakland Chinatown Chamber of Commerce. I serve on many capacity. I'm also the board member for Visit Oakland. I'm also the board member of Asian Health Services, but also the chair for the Apapa Greater Oakland chapter. But among many things, the city of Oakland, but also Chinatown has been becoming the epicenter for this AAPI hate. But I just want to go back to the opening remark. I did mention about racism and what people do understand what racism is all about. But I want to go back to the history. And the first thing is, the question would be, do we know, who helped to build this country? But if your answer is saying that, oh, I understand because of slavery, because of African American, then you know the answer. However, in this country, in our history, we have many dark chapters of the history. but the thing is that we have to move on. And the question would be, do we know that many of our brothers and sisters, suffering the most in this country of racism is our Black community, and which we have to understand that. Now I know that people also talk about, wow, you guys are doing pretty well, because they watch a movie called Crazy Rich Asians. So they all thought that we all coming out with briefcase of cash and coming to this country, but in reality, it's not true. And we all started because, in China, and we want to have a better living. So we are asked to build, come to this country to build the Continental Railroad. Okay. Now, I just want to go back to history. Do many of you know what Chinaman's chance is all about? Some of you may have heard about the term, but some people may not. Okay. So when Chinese people came to this country and to build the railroad, and they have to, lower this little bucket. And so this Chinese guy can sit on this little bucket and stick this dynamite. So they blow the big hole. Now, if you're lucky enough, they can pull you fast enough to come back out, then you survive. If not, so that's our Chinaman's chance. So it's not, like what people watch a movie, Crazy Rich Asians, but anyway, but one day before the Continental Railroad was completed, all Chinese, they were all fired just one day before that. So now that the Chinese, they lost all their jobs, no place to stay. They stay in San Francisco, and at the end, at some point, it became what they call Chinatown. And because they could not find jobs, so we have to create our own jobs. And nobody wanted to, welcome in Chinese. And I know that, the mentioning about the lynching. But now that you go to San Francisco, you know that that's a Broadway. And back then, Chinese could not cross Broadway. If you did, you got beaten up or you got lynched. So, it's not easy. And however, I have to give a lot of credit. There are many people that have done so much, they have done a good job in helping the people of color, and have a voice. And it came from the Black leadership, especially, one of my idols, one of the people I respected the most, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So he was the one helping many of us having a voice. So which is very, very important. Now, I think we also need to talk about what happened now. Because, I know my brother Gerald talked about politics. Absolutely right. Because now, the previous, president, and also the rhetoric is about dividing the people. And we also need to understand the system of this country is finding ways to dividing the people. So I also want you to know that when there is a crisis, many of our minority communities are pinning against each other. However, we can do a better job when we understand the history and learning what is happening now, so we can move ahead to the future, so to be better of all of this, because we want to stop all this racism, we want to stop discrimination. But you got to start with home, us. You got to start with us, and you got to start now. So with that, I want to turn it back to Gloria.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you for giving us the history and bringing us to now. Hi, Pei, can you hear me? And are you ready to introduce yourself and share on the question?
Sure, yeah. My name is Hai-Pei Xu. I'm the president of United Chinese Americans, or UCA, a national coalition and platform for Chinese Americans. Let me first set a stage for you about what recently had an incident that happened that put Chinese and the Black community on edge. Early in November, that is last month, a Chinese international graduate student of University of Chicago got killed for his cell phones. He's the only child of a divorced single mother who spent her whole life and savings to have prepared her son where she was before she was murdered. Only 6 months before that, at the same university. Another Chinese international student, a graduate student, also got murdered or killed for robbery reasons. Then 1 week after that Chicago killing, a video went viral of 3 Black teenager girls racially bullied some Chinese boys on a Philadelphia train and violently beat up a Chinese teenager girl who dared to ask them to stop. Last week, Chinese communities on the East Coast has held a big protest rally in a very cold day. I was there. Some progressive Chinese called those who attended the rally, quote unquote, those are the conservative Chinese. You know, we have our own tension and fault line within our own community. So that's the background of the recent incident. So I'm just trying to convey a very unvarnished version of what has happened. I don't know how we get here, but there are many factors, of course. I think the first reason is the fast growth of AAPI community. AAPI tend to congregate in the cities and the bi-coasts. So we bump into each other more now than before. We're getting more and more into, you know, the traditional quote unquote, the Black territory. So that's demographic. And as the wealth and jobs shift from city to the suburb and to the bi-coast, there's attendant loss of job and a gradual decay of urban settings, which is economic. And the third, I do think that there is a sociological and a cultural component to that. Breakup of a Black family, erosion of the influence of Black church, the flooding of the drug, and the shoot up of the crime, the culture of poverty. And yes, let's be honest, maybe there's also some wrong-headed leadership in the Black community. And the last and the fourth factor I would say is, let's face it, we do harbor discriminations, bias, prejudice, racism towards each other, despite of our best intent, especially those of us who are living in upper middle class of this country. I'm not so sure, I'm sure none of this is new to you. And you may or may not agree with my list. I myself is not quite sure about that myself, but I will stop here and let's wait until when we get to the solution part of our dialogue later on. Thank you.
I'm not sure that you introduced yourself. Did you?
Oh, I did.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Thank
Thank you very much for sharing and bringing out the tensions and the issues of violence. And yes, we need to address those as we move forward. Kim, could you join us in this conversation?
Yes. So good evening, everyone. I'm Kim Shirobi, a native Detroiter, a community practitioner. I have lived in my neighborhood my entire life, almost 60 years, retired physical education teacher with Detroit Public Schools, and lastly, a member of the James and Grace Lee Boggs Center. So how did we get here? As you all can hear, and I'm sure many of you all know, it's very layered. It's very layered. It's very complex. But one of the things that I want to add to how we got here is a practicing and accepting a poor definition of success. And I think that that has put a lot of strain on our relationships. Generally, Americans are considered successful when they have what I call stuff and status. Material things, high profile status, cars and expensive items, and oftentimes is at the expense of other people. And even if it means that people are in pain and suffering. And that pain and suffering normally is caused by systematic racism, oppression, and there's other kinds of, I should say, oppression that continues to cause us to be at odds with each other. And a lot of things have already been stated in terms of the, again, the media, how the media plays into this, how I should also add how we react and how we use our wealth, our stuff, and our status makes a big difference. And I'm really gonna stop there because I'm trying not to get into the solutions right now. I'm not trying to get into the solutions. So I'm gonna stop right there. But that's really where I think we've gotten caught up, is how we have embraced that definition of success and how we practice it too.
Thank you, Kimberly. I too want to move to where do we go from here? Piyush, would you please enter into our dialogue?
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. Thank you for the invite. Wonderful to listen to all these esteemed panelists talk about the topic at hand, very important for civic leadership. Just to introduce myself, my name is Piyush Malik. I am an engineer turned management consultant turned social entrepreneur. Professionally, my day job is dealing with applied artificial intelligence and cloud and so on and so forth for Fortune 500 companies. But on the give back activities, I'm involved dealing with technology and entrepreneurship. So social entrepreneurship is my side hustle, but I'm spending good amount of my evenings and weekends being the president of American Society of Engineers of Indian Origin, which has the goal to inspire the next generation of technologists and scientists in not only Silicon Valley, but all over through our various professional and student chapters. Again, as this organization was formed 38 years ago to allow the immigrant Indian technologists and engineers to fit into the America of that time. And the America of that time was a lot different than America of today. There have been cases of racism being demonstrated against not only Chinese, not only Koreans, not only Africans, but against Indians as well. And you know, these things don't come to light until you face it yourself. And for me, I faced it right after 9/11. It was only a few years that I had been welcomed very warmly in Silicon Valley that 9/11 happened. And a day after that, obviously the nation was stunned. But I found my car vandalized with writings on my property saying, "Immigrant, go back." More recently, there have been cases where members of the Indian community who happen to wear a turban, they are called Sikhs, they have been attacked. Elderly people have been thrown on the streets and have been hurt very bad, thinking of them as Muslims, or again, being a racist culture here. There have been cases in Los Angeles where a old Latina lady, more than 75 years old, she was thought of as a Asian. She was, there were slurs against her. She was badmouthed and she was attacked. And even I've read reports of people being spitted at. These are inhuman deeds which cannot be tolerated in a civil society. And we all have to stand up against it. And today, I see us at an inflection point with social unrest, cultural intolerance, racism, gun violence, and all of these are, getting compounded during these last 2 years of COVID. It is something for which behooves us to think, how did we get here? And to address that question, Gloria, I would say we got here through the mistrust and fear mongering. We got here because the media, mainstream as well as social media, has a tendency to show what sells and sensationalize, and then there's partisan politics. So I hope today's dialogue is a step forward where we can not only understand the current situation, but we can come up with some solutions. And how do we coexist peacefully? How do we make progress? And how do we make sure everybody lives peacefully in society? Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Piyush. And I'd like to call on Alex to close out this question by introducing yourself and sharing.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay, great. Good evening to everybody. My name is Alex Anderson, and I am a community leader. I started my career on Wall Street, worked for some large firms, moved to the PE side, and raised quite a bit of capital through the years, and started working more specifically to raise the communities that had the least representation. And that's how I got my foray into kind of the social justice side. Begrudgingly, I have to agree with just about everything I've heard about how we got here. Especially, I think Haipe made some very salient and succinct comments about the African American community. This has been a long going process for us. And you just have the communal breakup, you have the family breakup, you have the school to prison pipeline. You have welfare that no longer puts the man in the home and actually pays for the separation, and just the list goes on. I'm fortunate that I didn't have that experience in having a robust family life, a mother and father who I just lost my father in 2020, early 2020 before COVID started. And it was fast. But the point I'm getting to is that I was raised in a community where the community had action and they had responsibility to one another. So when I went outside to cut my lawn, if Miss Washington's lawn needed to be cut, my mom would tell me to cut her lawn too. And, the family was more than just the bloodline. It was the communal line. So my father spent 32 years in the Marine Corps. I've seen nothing but a rainbow of diversity. I've seen struggle, but I've seen nothing but a rainbow of diversity. When I went to the university, especially my upper division classes, I saw nothing but a rainbow of diversity. And so, and when I was growing up, we went to all kinds of restaurants. Some we experienced very distinct racism and discrimination, and others not so much. My father knew everybody. And in my family, we had some how do I want to say? We had some family that were kind of in the underworld, if you will. And I would walk the south side of Chicago with my grandmother, and my uncles and grandfathers' influence, who were part of that, that underworld, if you will, gave me a certain privy that, it's not as bad as, well, I'm not going to say that it's bad, but I'll just say that they would say, y'all, they would see me around and say, yeah, young buck, y'all keep on going. go on to school kind of thing. So I had a very different experience, but I knew that it was there. So my experience, and to the point that I'm sharing with how we got here, is that all of that was wiped away. The communities that I grew up in are no longer there. The insurance company that I used to take my grandmother's premium to is gone. The accounting firm that used to do the taxes for my aunt's shop is gone. When I got out of school, there were about 15 to 30 African American owned financial services firms. They're all gone. It's a collision effect of what happens when you take away from a community and there's no succession. Now, fortunately, I've been very lucky because I'm on a board of the National Asian American Coalition. My broad experience has allowed me to attach myself to an Asian coalition. My other half is Asian. So I'm not unique, because there are a lot of interracial marriages between African Americans and Asians of a wide extent. But I recognize, to the question that has been answered by many of the panelists, the erosion of our community and our elders, our big mamas, as we would call them, is a direct answer to why we have kids running amok. And having children myself, I have to teach them to be careful, because I don't want them to be a victim, because they have parents that love them and a community that nurtures them, and that's not always consistent. So that's my answer to how did we get here.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I can't thank you enough for the comments that have been made and the conversation that has come about with how did we get here, dealing with things like land use and media and community displacement, violence, racism, our history, and capitalism. And before I move forward with the next series of questions, I'd just like to pause and just indicate to the audience that Hong will be handling questions from the audience after the panel discussion. And because of timing, I have several questions, about 2 or 3 more questions to ask the panel. And I would just ask that we're not going to go through all of you. You can choose which ones you want to answer, and we'll take a couple for each of those questions, because we want to leave time for where we go from here and have each one of you respond to that question. So the question that the next question relates to, and it's been brought up by Gerald and several others, how does racial propaganda hinder racial relationships rather than enhance it? And one view is looking through the lenses of the media that plays a large part in promulgating the issue of the racial divide. I will start with Kim.
So in terms of the media, and I'm honestly, Gloria, I'm kind of at a loss in terms of how that's done. So I'm going to pass. I'm really, I just went blank. So I'm going to pass and let somebody else answer that at this point. Thank you.
That's fine. Is there someone that wants to respond to that question about the racial propaganda?
Can I say something?
Yes, Haite, and then we'll have Gerald follow you.
I really think this topic is in fact not that important. There are many other more important factors: political, sociological, cultural, economic, racial, that got into our relationship. Well, media may have played a role, but I personally wouldn't feel that it is one of the main culprits to be held responsible for what we are, where we are today. I think if we do that, we are whitewashing what's really going on. Thanks.
Thank you.
Gloria, if I may,
Yes, Tom.
Gloria, yes. So that question was also put on the Q&A directed to Gerald, Gerald Green.
Yes, Gerald will go next.
Yes. Okay. So
Great,
I would like to have a reverse to that
Yeah,
question.
quickly, I'm not saying that the media has done a perfect job on this, and I do see there's room to improve. But the media is the media. They do their stories the way they want, and yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I can't dispute the point that the media is the only issue, and I can't dispute the fact that the media is the media. They have their own charge. They have to essentially make money for the corporations that keep those networks going. I think what we have to do is put pressure on the media to tell the stories in a balanced ways. Yes, you can tell the stories about the sensational stories of the violence, but you also need to tell the stories about how the communities are working together. Don't just leave the impression that there's just violence going on. Try to communicate what else is going on, the work that is going on in the community to try to keep these two ethnic groups, as well as all the ethnic groups that generally live in the same communities together. Talk about some of the work that people like Carl Chen is doing. Let him come forward as he does as much as he can to talk and participate in these stories. The media does contribute to this, but I think we also have to take it upon ourselves individually to educate yourselves, in a way that allows you to understand where this information is coming from, and make sure that you try to see multiple sides of this argument and think for yourself. Don't just believe what's presented to you and what's being agreed upon, even by your friends or members of your family. Think for yourself. Have some understanding about other people so that you can generate compassion. I'm sure that Kimberly is going to talk a little bit about that. But if I can very quickly, not relying on the media. Generally, as we said before, this is the fact that the media has never gotten everything right. They didn't get the 1992 events around the riots in LA correct as well, and have promulgated an image that didn't exist, and are not even talking now about how those communities have worked together. It provides an example, I think, of how we can start working together, how the Korean and the African American communities began a journey in 1992 to talk, to have these difficult discussions, to learn about each other, to begin to understand each other's cultures, and to have some empathy and understanding for one another so that you can begin to understand that you do have things in common. I think we also have to begin to understand that what we do have in common is that government is an important way for us to get to a better solution. It's one of the most important ways. We have to have a proper representation. We have to understand that ethnic groups like Asian Americans, African Americans, Latinos, everybody, we do have political power that we should be using. It is common. We should be talking and having these difficult discussions. I agree. The media is not the main and the only problem, but it's a major contributor. Tell the full story. Tell the work that's going on in the community to keep us together.
Gerald, social media is 10 times worse than media, of which
when I'm saying media, I'm also including social media. And earlier, when you weren't on the set, I did speak to the dramatic impact that Facebook and Twitter have, because people believe what they see. Those things I've already said. I didn't want to repeat those again.
Absolutely agree.
But again, people have to understand where this information is coming from. They have to learn to think for themselves.
Thank you, Gerald. Piyush, did you want to have?
No, I was just endorsing the view that social media is definitely having a lot more sway in impacting the mindset and the thinking of folks. And that's something the government, I believe, is trying to do something about it. Facebook has openly admitted there was a whistleblowing case where it was proven how elections were swayed by Facebook. And now today, I hear both Instagram and WhatsApp will have a notification going if somebody has been on social media for too long. And these are some small steps in the right direction, but at the same time, content moderation, singling out any kind of misinformation away and take that down quickly is very important. YouTube is doing it right now. And I know for a fact, because they are using AI technologies that I work with to make that happen across multiple platforms. Different companies have different space of adoption. However, this is where our civic leadership, our political leadership has to come together and put pressure on these corporates so that we don't further pollute our communities, don't further pollute the minds of our youngsters.
And Gloria, real quick,
Yes.
I have to say that I was drawing a blank when you first called me. And so the mainstream media really is very important for, and it's had an impact, especially with Blacks, where we have been criminalized. I was working in El Paso, Texas, where I attended school at First Cafeteria. And I had a lady, Maria, look at me. And she said, she kept looking at me. And I asked her one day, why are you looking at me like that? I know you like, what's going on? She said, I have never met a Black person. You are calm. I thought all Black people were criminals. Why do you act that way? And so we have to really be careful. A lot of people are scared of Blacks because we have been pit as criminals. And fear is running rampant, even amongst ourselves. So I don't take that media lightly. It's very important for us to know how it's impacting us psychologically and how it leads to violence.
Kimberly, I think there is a stereotyping in the films as well, just not media, and we should systematically address that as well at some point.
I'm going to have to move the question, move the comments on, and thank you so much for the dialogue that's taken place. The next question is, as we think about the issues of institutional and structural racism that has resulted in displacement and economic gain, how does racial capitalism impact relationships among African Americans and Asian Americans? Who would like to address that?
This is Alex. I'd like to take a stab at that. That is a deep institutional network of tentacles and hatred that, I mean, it doing good is not always enough. And having a proper financial or balance sheet is not always enough. Having the right face and or team is not always enough. Because ultimately, the prism of our own discriminatory, racist ideas and beliefs, people are going to look at that and see if that's going to be undermined, changed, redirected, or anything of that nature. And in so doing, when someone looks at a project, that's what they're going to look for. They're going to look for, does this change or attack my narrative? Does this fundamentally change what I believe in? And if so, I'm not going to finance, produce, support any of those things that help that thing move along. I will find ways to bring impediments to slow this thing down, and if at all possible, stop it. The structure of capital is a nasty business, and it takes a lot of effort and a lot of people to speak when racism and discrimination show itself. The question becomes, in the project that you're doing, do you have enough lead time in order to get control over what it is that you're trying to do and still break down that wall and that barrier? A number of years ago, a small African-American led team out of Oakland was attempting to raise money which is very common now, by using CRA as a vehicle. They had a Harvard MBA, a Wharton MBA, a Stanford MBA. Did I say Wharton already? Yeah, Wharton MBA and NYU MBA as a part of their team, African Americans. And they went to the big banks. And the big banks, how they even got to the table is someone said in a meeting that they couldn't find talent. And so that got out there, and these young brothers, all from the Bay Area, but all attended these top line Ivy League colleges, and said, well, we've been working for years trying to do the things that they're saying that they can't find talent for. So they amassed and put themselves together and got a meeting. And so in that meeting, they went through a litany of questions about their backgrounds, and every last one had worked for top firms. The long and the short of it was, they came back, the banks came back and said to them, we don't know that you have, quote unquote, a product and or a place where you can go and do the things that you said that you can do. They were saying that we don't see a market for you. Well, when they came back with the deal flow, the deal log, with businesses ready to go, the banks were forced to say, okay, we'll go ahead, we'll make a small investment in you. And then the first bank, upon the first tranche to be allocated, reneged. And then it took an African American who worked at that bank, who was in the meeting, to put his career on the line and say, no, that's not what you said. You said, and that forced them to make that investment. Well, it was a cascading event, because as soon as one bank made the investment, other banks started making the investment. And then the platform for that whole industry just blew up. The point I think you understand the point. It was a very hard thing to watch as a young graduate student, to see these men be attacked in the way, and I'm being very tame in the way that they were attacked before they finally got their investment. But it took the counsel that they used was Asian American. They had like 4 different counsels: Asian American, African American out of New York, a Jewish firm out of New York, and there was another firm, I forget where they were from. So I mean, it was a rainbow coalition to make these things happen. This thing never happens in a vacuum, and the structures of racism are deep, and you have to have a wide network to really attack it, and to get people to come out of their comfort zone and say no. So trying not to get too passionate about it, but that's been my experience. It takes somebody to finally say that enough is enough, no. And I'm going to stand up with my brother here or my brother there, and we're going to make this thing move, because it's the right thing to do, period.
Thank you, Alex. Kimberly, I know that you wanted to say something to this. We had talked about the capitalism issue. We are at a time where we need to move to the last question so that everyone has an opportunity to speak to it. So if there is something that you want to share with respect to that, please feel free.
I'm going to let other people speak, and I'll jump in. Thank you, Gloria, for opening that up for me, but I'm going to let some other people speak.
So if there's someone that wants to speak to this, we only have about a minute before we need to go to the last question.
Let me,
Carl?
Carl, I've already spoken. If you have something you want to say, you go right ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, because I think the whole issue that we are focusing on the problems. I think we have to talk about the solutions. Okay, so it's all about decision making. Okay, whether it's in banking, politics, and who have the authority to say who gets what, it's important. So in different industry, whether it's in high tech and all that, that's the reason why we need to making sure that we push for that, whether, Asian, the Black community, and many of us got to be involved so that we'll be being the decision makers as well. So we cannot just wait until people they say you can have it. So I think, it's also our responsibility to push and making sure that our younger generation and us and many of you can be the decision makers. So that's the things that we need to do as well.
Thank you, Carl. And you lead us into the last question, which this is a time to grow our humanity. How can we move this needle to a place of welcoming and embracing our uniqueness and understanding our differences? Where do we go from here? What's happening in your communities? What differences are you making? Where do we go from here? And I'd like each one of you to respond to that as our last question. Piyush or
since I started, since I started the first question, I think I'll start this one, but I'm going to also try to be as short as possible because I think that there are others who are going to contribute to this and they certainly need to be heard. But without a doubt, we're going to have to be prepared to have some difficult conversations. We're going to have to include a lot more people and a lot more groups than just the African Americans and Asian Americans in those discussions. And those discussions are going to be for the purpose, in my opinion, of educating one another and getting one another to really begin to understand each other and recognize that we have things in common. I think that some of this work is already going on. And that's why I think what I'd kind of like to do is to relinquish my time, because I know that Carl is going to speak about some of the things that he's been doing. I know that there are also groups in San Francisco, CYC, Community Youth Center, which is working in the Vietnamese community to help Vietnamese community, Mano-speaking groups to understand their neighbors, understand African American community, and vice versa, and understand the trials and tribulations that we've each been going through. And so that kind of stuff is what we need to happen. Usually the solutions and the first steps start with community organizations like the one Carl is a part of, and local churches. And that's where this is going to have to start. The pressure will build there, in my opinion, and then it goes on to the local leaders, in which there'll be some legislation. And then from there, hopefully it moves on to Sacramento and Washington, because we do need their involvement as well. So I hope that I haven't taken up too much time, but we have to get prepared for some tough discussions. We have to educate one another.
Carl?
Okay, quickly, I just keep it short. So I think education is important. Education in school, in family, in workplace, especially politics, and also media and social media. And I want to make sure that our community leaders will come out as well. We have to remember racism still existing. Discrimination is there, and let's work together. And we will talk about race. Let's talk about one race that we all can support, which is human race. If we can work together and have better understanding with each other, I think we can make those changes, and it's going to be a better world for all of us.
Thank you. Ayush?
Thank you. Great thoughts so far. I think being in others' shoes is very important, and treat others as you would want them to treat you. Basic fundamental philosophers from time immemorial have been saying that. But how do we apply that here? In our communities, I think we've got to catch them young. So basically, we've got to start with our kids. We've got to make our kids aware of the multicultural societies that we live in, and tell them to be confident in your looks, your own accents, your own behaviors. At the same time, accept the other person as they are. Not ask them to change, not expect them to change, but at the same time, live together with accepting our uniqueness, make our kids proud of our cultures, and not to feel misfits. So we'll have to treat them like this at our home, as well as we'll have to have some programs in schools promoting multicultural tolerance. And in all of this, spirituality can have a role. I've worked with an organization called International Association for Human Values for 10 years. I've been volunteering there. And I see the kind of programs they run in schools where de-stressing of kids, because kids get suicidal if they are felt as misfit. If you have to teach them something, if you have to instill good values, one of the best values you can instill is accept your neighbor as your brother, accept your neighbor as your sister, and then progress in the society. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kimberly?
Okay, so right now here in Detroit, we're practicing community building in our neighborhoods with each other. And in addition to that, we're reaching out to all people and modeling the kind of behavior that we want to see in the world. We're creating the environments and the culture that we wanted to see in the world. So this is the next steps that I believe that should happen, showing compassion for each other, turning to each other, all people, and making sure that everyone is supported and taken care of.
Thank you, Kim. Alex? Are you present, Alex?
I am. What am I commenting on?
You're commenting on where do we go from here, and our timing is winding down. We wanted to hear from you, and then we need to hear from Taipei as well to close this out.
We need a catalyst that drives us back as human beings to see the communities as our homes, as our extended family members, as I kind of alluded to from the way that I grew up. And I recognize that, that's not possible for everybody, but it's what works for me. It's worked for me. I live in a very diverse world, and I recognize the beauty in that diversity. But that was girded because of my mother and father, my grandmother, my grandparents, and just the community as a whole. Playing sports is another way of really driving that, because there's no one dominant thing in sports anymore. I mean, yes, there is, but no, there isn't. And if you're lucky to go to college and you get in the upper divisionals, I mean, you're going to have a wide diversity of people. So, however I could give my experience as a child growing up and the parents that I had growing up, I wish that for everybody. But if we can't get there, I'll go to the spiritual part. But it's really up to us as adults to make this happen. And I'm critically committed to that. And grab one. I've grabbed 4 along the line, and I've raised 4 kids that weren't mine. So I tell you, with the most love to all of you, that's just jump in the pool, find one.
Thank you, Alex. Taipei, we started with you and we will close with you. So please, your comments.
Thank you, Gloria. And Alex, what you said really touched me. Not long ago, Chinese American, we do live among Blacks. We mix up with the Black communities, and that particular place and the people in my mind is called Mississippi Chinese. If you have any interest, you can go back and find that. We also know that there are quite a few good mixed up community of Chinese and with the local dark-skinned people in Caribbean, like Jamaica. But that's history. Now let's look forward. I want to look forward, and I want to say I have had enough of this country where people are more and more divided, and we're actually have less and less goodwill and trust towards each other. politically and otherwise, right? And I don't even want to know why and how we get here, honestly. Just like Piyush said, that we need to catch those kids when they were young. What shocked me this time, and I encourage you to see the video if you can, what shocked me this time about those 3 teenager girls on the Philadelphia train is not that they bullied others. It's not that they beat up a Chinese girl badly. Things of that happens among the kids. It is the tone that those girls, teenager, 13-year-old young girls, the way they say things and the look in their eyes, which certainly tells me that there's not enough love or normalcy in their life, in their family, and maybe even in their immediate neighborhood. I want to catch those young girls before they grow up and it is become too late. I just want to find ways to truly help each other out and give our best and our communities resources to each other. For example, Chinese American communities, and especially in Bay Area, has a lot of human resources about the STEM, the science and technology, engineering stuff, that we can organize and offer to African American youth. But how do we do it? How do we do it in a way that is not patronizing to the Black community, in a way that is truly appreciated and needed by those kids in trouble or a bit lagging behind? And who do we partner with? You know, I tried and I wouldn't say my best, but I tried a lot to find an answer to those questions in the past few years. I don't have a good answer after a few years of searching around. I can mobilize, and we can mobilize our community through United Chinese American and other platforms on a national scale to do it, but I don't even know how to put my foot forward, so to speak, and help us, please. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to respond, Hai-Pei. I think that we've shared, Carl and others, about there are ways that we can continue to work on this. This is not, this is a journey and not a destination. We have opportunities here to move this needle further. We recognize the tensions and the issues that have plagued our community, many of which have been fostered by social media, capitalism, and all of these other issues that you have so distinctly raised. And so with that, I would like to thank the panel and turn it back to Diana and or Hong.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gloria. Thanks to all the panelists. It's truly the wonderful discussion. And we are going to continue this dialogue because today is just the start, just the opening. But I'm going to give the microphone to Mr. Ken Fong to give us a summarize because he's been taking notes and doing research for today's discussion. Before that, I want to introduce Mr. Ken Fong. Ken is the chairman of Canson Ventures. Kenneth Fong has spent the last 32 years in biotech industry. He is best known for founding the biotech company CloneTech, the one of the largest genetic tool companies founded by Asian Americans in the United States. After CloneTech was acquired, Ken continued his career as a venture capitalist with Canson Venture that he founded. He has since cultivated more than 10 highly successful entrepreneurs involved with the M&A and IPO that are worth of $3 billion. Ken served as the president of the Chinese bioscientists in North America and the president of the Bay Area Asian American Manufacturers Association, AAMA, which was founded by Mr. Sandy Chow. He was a member of the Board of Trustees of the California State University System. His philanthropic interests include scholarships to San Francisco State University, Beijing University, UC Berkeley, Stanford University, and San Francisco State University. Now I'm going to give the microphone to Mr. Ken Fong to give us a summary. Ken, the stage is yours. Ken, please unmute yourself. Ken, you are muted. You have to click the microphone to unmute yourself. It's on the left bottom. You saw the small microphone icon? You saw that? Ken, you have to mute yourself. I cannot unmute you. You have to unmute yourself. It's on the left bottom. You see the small icon of the microphone? Yes, now you're here. Okay, you're
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm a high-tech guy. I don't do high-tech. I don't know how to do it. But anyway, I am not a really outspoken person in terms of a social issue. I read a lot. I tell you, that's the reason why Diane wanted me to talk about it because she knows that I probably would not be a subjective person. I try to be objective. I wrote down quite a few things of what every one of you said. Let me do a little bit my summary here. So the topic is how to have African Americans and Asian Americans work together. So my feeling is this: sit and work on common ground and respect the differences. So when I immigrated to this country in the late 60s, probably about 50 years ago, wow, that's a long time ago, my father lived his whole life in San Francisco, Chinatown. When I arrived in San Francisco, Chinatown, he told me, we belong to Chinatown. They do not welcome us outside Chinatown. That's what my father told me. Well, that was a kind of wake-up call when I came from Hong Kong. So I did not have that kind of experience. When I heard it from my father, he said, I belong to Chinatown. I don't belong outside Chinatown. Well, that is really the kind of experience to me, when I actually joined my father. Then I learned that, of course, Martin Luther King and many Black leaders in our country had made a difference, the so-called civil rights movement, to make a huge difference in the life of every minority group in our countries. So the freedom of housing, education, and jobs for all of us Asian American cannot be taken for granted if not for the struggle of the Black Americans in our countries. We should remember that. So we should learn from the lesson of the African American and work together between the African American and us Asian American to form what we call a perfect union. So what are the differences between African American and Asian Americans? Well, in perception and reality, we know that African American are good in entertainment, sports, and political empowerment. We admire, the political empowerment because we Asian Americans are really somewhat lacking. So we Asian American are good in what? In education, in business. That's what the Black American admire us. At one time, probably maybe 30 some years ago, one of my Black friends mentioned to me that, hey, you guys have a lot of bank you can get money from. We African Americans don't know where to get a bank money. So I learned that they admire us for having those Chinese American bank, which I took it for granted. It's not easy. We don't have a bank there, Asian American bank. How can you get the money there for the people to borrow to do the thing that you like to do? So as Asian American, we should do our best in raising the educational level of young African Americans. We should not focus on our own ethnic groups because until the Black Americans are as fully educated as we are, some of the Black youth problem may not be easily resolved in our community. That is what I believe, because I am really the beneficiary of the higher education in this country. I'm a little bit different from Haiping and Sandy. They came here for higher education when they came from, foreign country to the USA. I came here just because my father asked me to come here. He's an immigrant. He asked me to come here to work. But because the higher education is so easily accessible to us Asian Americans, that's why I get benefit from it. That make my whole difference in my life going forward after my education. So I feel that we should apply what we know about higher education to African American to help them. Until that happens, those Black issues may not be easily resolved. That should be one of our responsibility and aims. So if we are as good as we are in business, we have to help hire more African American youth in business and cultivate them to be successful in business so that they can repeat the vicious cycle in business. And that's important. In conclusion, we should cherish our differences and use our respective talent for the common good of both communities. Well, that's my impression about, listening to what all you have to say. But I'll tell you one thing, which I learned from my daughter. My daughter told me that, what's the common ground between Asian American and African American? And she's told me, well, all they like Jackie Chen and also Bruce Lee. So that's the real common among both communities. Anyway, that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Ken. Yes. Yes, there are so many great resources for education, and how can all the communities get access to this resource, and what we can do to support each other, like Haipei just mentioned. So now I want to open the Q&A and give the microphone to Hang Yuefang to lead this section. Hang, please go ahead. Hang, you are muted. We cannot hear you. But first of all, I want to thanks to all the sincere dialogue and also the questions. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, everyone. This has been a very, very informative and powerful. I do want to take. I'm going to read off partially a very important question that came from an anonymous attendee. It's as several of you have already mentioned, that this is a very difficult topic and we need to get to difficult conversations. So I do want to read out this question. So the question that's this person, an anonymous person, is asking is this, right? It's clearly an Asian person who is saying to stay away from the Black criminal who are endangering and robbing, everyone in sight. That is putting ourselves in danger. So we need to avoid those people, no matter that there are Blacks who are well-meaning, you don't know. So the best thing is to avoid all Blacks. So this person is putting that out. I do want to address difficult questions, and I want to put that to the panel if anyone would like to pick that up.
I would like to, Hong. I just want people to check out, I'm typing it, check it out, called The Bus Hero, under the GoFundMe, okay? And that's a story I put out with the reporter. And, some of you may remember this one elderly Asian man was in the bus. And he got beaten up by someone with a cane. So this, a person, this lady who's Black on the bus. So what she did, she shielded herself from the attack, from this guy, and to protect this Asian elderly man. So this, and then this attacker, later on went off the bus. And what she did, she went down the bus and using the video and chased after him and took the video. And then this attacker, instead of attacking that elderly Asian man, now he was attacking this Black lady on the bus. Okay, so when I learned about the story, I quickly turned it over to ABC. I think they only took the story. And then I also did a GoFundMe on her. And because she was actually being attacked, not only that, actually the guy also went to her house, and then she felt so unsafe. So we thought that it would be good for her to move away from that her own house. So many people read the story, and so I just want you to understand that we cannot always saying that Black people are the criminals. Okay, we also have good people and hero. In this case, called a bus hero. I want people to check it out and the GoFundMe, because that's a story that people should be aware of. And not only, I tell you what happened. So we have a great review and the reaction from the Asian community, because they're not only saying, what you just, that person saying that, but remember, they are also good story, and we want to utilize the media to spin out good story as well. So we should not be playing out when people keep saying that, that's Black people are only attackers and they're criminals, and that is not true. So I want to point out that the bus hero.
Good story.
Thank you very much. Yes, I don't want to answer the questions. I just wanted to you.
May I respond, Hong? This is
yes,
Steve.
please,
Dr.
Wong. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So that comment / question that you read from the chat, which is posted anonymously there, was also posted under the name Jack Ga in the chat. And this person, if this is a person, because it has said a lot more in the chat as well. And the things they're saying are patently racist. They are terribly ill-informed, and they seem to be from someone who has not listened to anything that's been said here tonight. So I don't know if that is actual person, if that person is trolling, but what is coming under that name, Jack Ga, reflects not at all listening to what has been said here tonight. So there's some things that need to be said to respond to that point that you read from them, and that broader thinking that is reflected there. First, we need to remind ourselves we're talking about race, which is a biological fiction, but it is a social and political reality. That is to say, there is no biological basis for this concept of race. There is the idea of race says that we can segment human populations into mutually distinct categories. In fact, we cannot do that biologically. The phenotype, we do have phenotypical differences, but those in themselves do not mean anything, but race organizes a way to think, to say that they do. And most importantly, race is a hierarchy. Race creates a hierarchy. So we are talking about racialized groups. African Americans, Asian Americans are racialized groups, and we are thrown into this racial hierarchy. Now I said that in the passive voice, we are thrown. Europeans, white people have constructed this notion of race that we are all operating under. Now, having said that, let me make sure we also need to recognize that the racial category of Black or African American is not completely analogous, again, because race already is a fiction, to Asian American. What I mean is this: Asian American, as you all know through your lived experience, we all know, many of you through your lived experience, Asian American is a large, expansive term, which includes people from various nations. And there is a range of experience and language and other differences among the people who are racialized as Asian Americans. And they come from various nations, many of which have been decimated by European colonialism. So the histories that bring about the category of Asian American and that bring about African American are embodied in the conflicts that we're talking about. And we have to recognize that. So one of the questions earlier to the panel was about racial capitalism. And we have, the word capitalism has been addressed a little bit here, but we need to be explicit that capitalism is an exploitative economic system. Colonialism is related to capitalism. And so if we really want to explore the roots of the conflicts and tensions that we're talking about and living with, we have to recognize the exploitation of the capitalist economic system. The council member spoke about the Chinese exclusion, and Chinese exclusion followed the recruiting of Chinese men as laborers to build the railroads, and the brutal exploitation that flowed from that. That is a part of capitalist economic history. Now, there's plenty much more that I don't have time to, I've already taken a lot of time, but I think we need to make sure that that be part of our understanding of the depths of the conversation that we're having. And again, I'll close where I began. If this person, if Jagat is in fact a person who's, they do not seem to be generally engaged in this conversation, but the things that have been said under that name reflect an ignorance of the conversation happening and the dire need to directly and explicitly counteract those types of, that type of thinking.
Right. Thank you so very much for the answer. Yes, I think it's good to have the explicit answer be brought out to these questions. Otherwise, they stay silent in people's head. Thank you again. There's another question that's related, and actually in terms of social economics. So there are a couple of questions that I've seen, and they were saying that the Blacks that have been hurting Asian Americans actually are perhaps, homeless people and disenfranchised, homeless, stressed people. So the question brought back to, so these are social conditions, right? Social political issues in society that brings about the violence. So how do we address those things? I mean, what is the problem here? How can we address that? That the fact that people lower on the socioeconomic ladder suffer and also, are not thinking straight and suffer and become violent and become stressed, and they hurt other people. So that's another dimension to this question. I wonder if anybody would like to address that part.
I thought that there has something to do with the relaxation of the law. That's one issue. The second I learned is that has something to do with the defunding of the police. That's a perception. And so there's an increase in this kind of phenomena in the Bay Area, in which we have read in newspaper. And so those are issues. It's a social issue aggravated by the change of law. So the perception that you can get away from doing this, and so that's the reason why those kind of things happen. And Chow probably can speak on this issue much more objectively than we do.
I started off, this is Kim. I started off earlier talking about how people see success, how they deal in materialism and stuff and status. So how do we take our, what we're calling success, how do we take that and help build each other? That's my new definition. It's not about things. It's not about being known. It's about I want to suggest that our new definition should be about how we can enhance and advance human beings, help each person develop in a positive manner. And whatever it takes for us to do that is what it takes, whether it takes voice, and as Carl talked about, voice and action, where somebody says, no, no more, no more. When we begin to take a stance, when we begin to really share and show compassion and love, and those are not issues. Those are ways of being. Those are living by principle. So if we continue as human beings caring for each other, we can create a condition where people can thrive.
Now, may I give some comments or questions back to the panelists? Is it that the lack of opportunity and then in education, and then the lack of it takes generation to catch up in a lot of things, and then especially in education, and then in job opportunity, and also handling mental health. I think a lot of times it is not because of a prejudice or any hate or whatever. It is sometimes mental health. it is sometimes desolate because of not having enough opportunity to equal employment, and then not to have the parents not struggling to make the income and allow a more relaxed situation for educations and everything. But all this takes significant effort, and sometimes it takes generations to catch up. So therefore, basically, would it be we should work together to make a fair system, to make it an opportunity that equal to all, rather to have a suppressed situation. So therefore, basically, we all have to work together very, very hard in order to improve the opportunity, to reduce the mental health pressure, and then a lot of various economic reasons. So therefore, it's not an immediate situation that we can eliminate poverty, eliminate lack of education, eliminate the mental health. I think it takes a concerted effort to really to work for a better society.
Yeah, that's what I agree. The education is a leveling playing field. I think the Asian American benefited tremendously in this country by having this opportunity for higher education. And we really benefit from the American education system. So I think the African American actually are not below that. So we have some obligation to help our fellow African American to do so. Unless this thing is brought to a level that can raise the education level of the Black youth, this problem would continue to persist. And that's very important as a broad pictures.
However, we have to understand that it's not any superiority. It's because a lot of immigrants coming here, the only way is to get a scholarship to university here. So they are the top of the top within their own country coming here. So therefore, in such a case, and then this is why when we get that education here, but the people already came in as the best of their own country, and then getting here. So therefore, getting so much benefit from it, we just have to give back to the society.
That's one thing to look at that. And there's another way you can look at that. We have to change somewhat our education system. There's a lot of high-tech company, they need someone, it doesn't have to be a advanced degree. They need someone to perform certain tasks in a high-tech company, and so you can satisfy what those need of this high-tech company. You might not even need a higher, education degree, but this education system has to be adjusted from the high-tech company to those, Black youth and maybe even other youth that can satisfy the demand of those, high-tech company. So, that I read about 3 weeks ago of the 7 of the 8 richest cities in the United States. 7 of them are in California, and most of them are in Northern California. Why? It's really the wealth is created by the high tech. And I just talked to the CFO, Fiona Ma, yesterday, and she told me that they have $40 billion surplus. And I asked her, what surplus come from? Was that enjoyed by the other state of the union? No. California is one of the few, maybe the only one, who enjoys $40 billion surplus. It all come from what? The stock market. The stock market come from what? From those people who benefit is the Silicon Valley, company. So that education system, we have to also have to really benefit the Black Americans, because we are not doing that. We're not doing enough.
I wonder if I can add something to this conversation, which seems to be taking place at a very, very high level. Yeah. Earlier we spoke about, the question is about capitalism. And I think earlier it may have been Kimberly that contributed that in this country, people define success as having the accoutrements of success: jewelry, cars, house. Let's also acknowledge that everybody that lives in this country is also being bombarded with this message that in order for you to be success, you do have to have these items. Some people are not interested in the path to success through education. We have to acknowledge that. They want to get to success. They want a car. They want this watch. They want to wear nice clothes. They want everything they see LeBron James wearing. They want everything that they see Jackie Chan doing. They want it, and they want it now.
Yeah.
And they don't want to take a path that requires them to spend 4 or 5 years or more going through an educational system.
Yeah.
And they take the shortest path to success in their mind.
Yeah.
And that is crime.
Yeah.
That is knocking somebody over the head and taking their Rolex watch or their jades or following the stereotypes and trying to amass their success through these accoutrements.
Yeah.
And I believe that there needs to be some alternative to demonstrate that there are, first of all, different definitions of success.
Yeah, but they have
And
to know
at the
that,
same time, we need to somehow or another provide paths to these successes that don't involve you using high tech, that don't involve you becoming a PhD or an associate professor. Somehow or another, this country lost our way in trying to prepare people to take care of themselves in the future by working normal, regular jobs. They don't have to have these high-tech understandings and these degrees from these high-tech, from these learned institutions. Somehow or another, we have to get back to providing opportunities, economic development. Somehow or another, we have to provide these young African-American males with different examples of success and show them the path to that and help them to understand that life is not just about wearing gold watches and wearing all this jewelry and so forth, so on, that you see people doing that, but that doesn't necessarily equate to success. We have to provide other examples. We have to provide education, but we have to also educate people that there's different means of providing and generating success.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so much that what you mentioned about is really role model. Because we just need all those role model, and then the rightful role model, I think is just a lot of times, I believe within the role model, we have to really re-emphasize a moral compass. And
and if I can interrupt you, those models, those role models that you're really speaking to, and Alex talked about it, and I have to go back to what Hypa said earlier. Those role models should be coming from your parents or should be coming from people that you respect, that you are responsible to. And that doesn't happen now, unfortunately, for a lot of reasons.
This is why
we have to make people understand those things. But I do agree that we have to provide role models, but they've got to be role models that these young kids can buy into. And I think that at the same time, both Hypa and I think it was also said that we have to start getting to kids. We have to start bringing this to kids at a very early age. Mm-hmm. I don't want to imply that we've already lost some, but we have to recognize that this education has to be broadened to not just the books. It has to be broadened to relationships. It has to be broadened to include a different understanding about what it means to be successful and contribute. And that has to start early on. And those messages do come from TV, they come from media and from a lot of places. Right. But, I think that we also need to bring this conversation down from the 10,000 feet elevation down to the reality that we have to provide different paths.
Yeah, Gerald, one thing I would want to mention here is I agree with you.
May I just Piyush, may I just interrupt you all for 1 minute? This is a wonderful conversation. I just wanted to remind everybody that we have already run the clock by 30 minutes. But I don't want to stop this conversation. I think about 50 people in the audience are still hanging on. So So it was, I just wanted to democratically bring that up. That is, we all agree to carry this on, right? Just to let you know, I don't want to rob your hours, just to make sure you understand that we are extending the time.
Okay, I have 2 minutes to put my point here. To the fact that both Sandy mentioned and both Gerald mentioned. So Gerald, the definition of success definitely is evolving. The definition of what is the future of work, if you look around, the companies announcing all around in high tech where degrees will not be required for future. IBM did that 10 years back. Google is doing it now, Microsoft and others are also doing it right now. So this is only about the tech companies I'm talking about, that you don't need an advanced degree. Right after 12th standard, IBM started a program called P-Tech, where in Queens in New York, kids were able to get to a 6-year program from middle school onwards, and they were guaranteed a job at IBM after that 6 years program. And that model has spread to 30,000 schools around the world now. Coming back to the point Sandy mentioned, mental health is important. And that's where earlier in my comments, I mentioned there's an organization, International Association for Human Values. They conduct these programs for kids in middle school and high school, where every week they are taken through this program where through structured breathing, through yoga exercises, the kids are introduced to being self-centered, and spirituality rather than religion is important here. So spiritual, being inwards, and then that makes them compassionate. That makes them understanding of the other cultures, and then having the right role models, starting from the parents at home, teachers at school, and the community members like ourselves. We can do a lot in setting the right standards for the kids. And once again, I'll say, have these kids start young, catch them young. And with that, I salute all of you. Thank you. Namaste to you all. With the organizers who have put this program together. Thank you for bringing me here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. At this point, I think we have answered most of the questions. In any case, there are some remaining, but we have already vastly extended the time. With that, I'd like to ask Diana to come back and close the session for today. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much, Han. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I think that this dialogue can go on much longer, but I really want to thank to everyone. Today we have speakers and community leaders from San Francisco, South Bay, Silicon Valley, Oakland, Detroit, Washington, D.C., representing multicultural communities. I want to thank to each speakers again, Mr. Sandy Chow, Dr. Stephen Ward, Honorable Assembly Lee, Mr. Ken Fang, Ms. Kimberly Sarabi, and Mr. Gerald Green, Mr. Kao Chen, Mr. Piyush Malik, Mr. Haipei Xue, and Mr. Alex Anderson, and our moderators, Gloria Yang, Haongyue Fang, and the coordinator, Sandy Wang. We are the media and try very hard to tell the story that uplifting our community and bring our community together instead of drawing the eyeballs. Thanks to our audience for sharing your true feelings, open up your heart. This is a great opportunity for us to listen to each other, learn from each other, and embrace each other. Especially listen to other side of the stories. Really like what Kim said. We hope this is not just an event. This is a beginning to start a long-term relationship. We're going to host this again and hope to invite you back, and also hope to our audience can join us. If you guys have any questions, and you can send an email to me and Sandy, or you can post on our website. We're going to post this video on our website pretty soon. This has been live streamed on YouTube. So if you search Ding Ding TV on YouTube, you will be able to watch the recordings and share the link to your friends. With that, I'm going to call it a day and say Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all of you. And thank you all. Thank you so much.
Merry Christmas. Let's do it again.
Sandy,
Thank
I'm
you,
going to see you
everyone.
again, Sandy.